The autumn of 1887 brought more than just changing leaves to the Arizona territory. It brought 7-year-old Nayeli, a Apache girl whose very presence in the town of Copper Creek had become a source of heated debate among the civilized citizens, who considered themselves her betters. Nayeli had been found 3 months earlier by a cavalry patrol, the sole survivor of an Apache band that had been wiped out during what the military report euphemistically called a necessary engagement with hostile forces. The child had been discovered hiding in a cave, half dead from starvation and exposure, clutching a doll made from corn husks that was her only remaining connection to the family she had lost. The local Indian agency had tried to place Nayeli in the government school at Carlisle, but her violent resistance to their civilizing methods had earned her a reputation as unmanageable. She had bitten 3 teachers, escaped twice, and refused to speak anything but Apache despite months of punishment designed to break her will and force her to abandon her savage ways. "The girl is simply too wild," declared Agent Harrison Whitmore during a town meeting that had drawn every prominent citizen of Copper Creek. "She shows no capacity for learning proper behavior, no willingness to embrace Christian values, no desire to become a productive member of civilized society." Dr. Cornelius Morrison, the town's only physician and a man whose medical degree from Harvard gave his opinions considerable weight, nodded in grave agreement. "I've examined the child extensively, and I must concur with Agent Whitmore's assessment. There appears to be something fundamentally defective in her nature, a savage quality that resists all attempts at correction or improvement." The townspeople murmured their agreement, comfortable in their shared conviction that some people were simply beyond redemption. Nayeli, they had decided, was one of those people. "What do you propose we do with her?" asked Mayor Thomas Bradford, a man whose political ambitions were served by maintaining the appearance of Christian charity while avoiding any actual inconvenience. Agent Whitmore consulted his papers with the air of a man delivering a medical diagnosis. "The territorial authorities have determined that the child is, quite simply, too savage to save. She will be transported to the reservation at Fort Apache, where she can live among her own kind without troubling decent people further." The meeting might have ended there, with Nayeli's fate sealed by the collective wisdom of Copper Creek's leading citizens, if not for the unexpected voice that spoke up from the back of the room. "Gentlemen, I believe you're making a mistake." Every head in the room turned to look at Marcus Thompson, a rancher whose presence at town meetings was so rare that many people had forgotten he lived in the area. At 43, Marcus was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with silver and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors under harsh skies. Marcus had inherited his ranch from his father and built it into one of the most successful operations in the territory through hard work, innovative methods, and a reputation for treating his employees with unusual fairness and respect. But he was also known as a solitary man who kept to himself and rarely involved himself in community affairs. "Mr. Thompson," Mayor Bradford said with obvious surprise, "we weren't expecting your participation in this discussion." Marcus stepped forward, his boots echoing in the suddenly quiet room. "I've been listening to your debate about this child, and I have to say I'm disturbed by what I'm hearing." Agent Whitmore bristled at the implied criticism. "Mr. Thompson, this matter involves complex issues of federal Indian policy that may be beyond your understanding. The child in question has proven herself to be utterly resistant to civilizing influences. Have you considered," Marcus asked mildly, "that maybe your civilizing influences are the problem, not the child?" The room erupted in shocked murmurs at such a radical suggestion. Dr. Morrison stood up, his face flushed with indignation. "Mr. Thompson, are you suggesting that Christian education and proper moral instruction are somehow inappropriate for a savage child?" Marcus looked around the room at the faces of his neighbors, people he had known for years, but who suddenly seemed like strangers, united in their casual cruelty toward a child who had already lost everything. "I'm suggesting," Marcus said quietly, "that calling a 7-year-old girl savage says more about us than it does about her. I'm suggesting that maybe the reason she's fighting so hard is because she's smart enough to recognize that you're trying to kill everything that makes her who she is. Agent Whitmore's face turned red with anger. Mr. Thompson, that child is a product of a primitive culture that worships false gods and practices barbaric customs. Our job is to save her soul by teaching her proper Christian values and civilized behavior. And how's that working out for you? Marcus asked dryly. From what I hear, 3 months of your salvation has turned a traumatized child into what you're calling an irredeemable savage. Maybe the problem isn't that she can't learn. Maybe the problem is that you don't know how to teach. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge, and Marcus could see several men in the crowd beginning to look angry at his implied criticism of their methods and motives. Mayor Bradford attempted to restore order to the meeting. Mr. Thompson, while we appreciate your perspective, the fact remains that qualified professionals have determined this child to be beyond help. Unless you have some alternative solution to propose, as a matter of fact, I do. Marcus said firmly, I propose to take responsibility for the girl myself. The silence that followed Marcus's announcement was so complete that the ticking of the clock on the wall seemed unnaturally loud. Finally, Dr. Morrison found his voice. Mr. Thompson, surely you can't be serious. You're proposing to take a savage child into your home? A child who has proven herself violent and uncontrollable. I'm proposing to take a frightened, traumatized child who has lost her entire family and give her a chance to heal in an environment where she's treated with kindness and respect instead of punishment and contempt. Agent Whitmore shook his head vigorously. Mr. Thompson, you clearly don't understand what you're dealing with. This child is not some lost puppy that can be tamed with kindness. She is the product of a warrior culture that values violence and resistance to authority. She will never become a proper young lady suitable for civilized society. Marcus felt his temper beginning to rise at the man's arrogant dismissal of an entire culture and a child's potential. Agent Whitmore, I've had enough of your expertise. You've had 3 months to help this child, and all you've managed to do is terrorize her further. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. And what approach would that be? Dr. Morrison asked skeptically. Treating her like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. Marcus replied simply, giving her time to grieve her losses instead of punishing her for them. Teaching her new things without demanding that she forget everything she already knows. Mayor Bradford leaned forward in his chair, clearly intrigued despite his skepticism. Mr. Thompson, even if we were to consider such an irregular arrangement, what makes you think you could succeed where trained professionals have failed? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about his own experiences with loss and trauma, about the healing that had come through patience and understanding rather than force and control. Because I know what it's like to lose everything and have people tell you how you should feel about it, Marcus said quietly. Because I understand that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who fight hardest against having their spirits broken. And because I believe that every child deserves someone who sees their potential instead of just their problems. The room buzzed with whispered conversations as the townspeople tried to process this unexpected development. Agent Whitmore was clearly frustrated by the derailment of his neat solution to an inconvenient problem. Mr. Thompson, Agent Whitmore said with barely controlled anger, even if the town were willing to consider such an arrangement, federal regulations clearly state that Indian children must be placed in approved educational facilities where they can receive proper supervision and instruction. Then we'll make it legal, Marcus replied calmly. I'll adopt her as my daughter, which gives me the same rights as any other parent to make decisions about her education and upbringing. Dr. Morrison laughed harshly. Mr. Thompson, no judge in the territory would approve the adoption of a savage child by a white man. Such a thing is not only unprecedented, but potentially dangerous to the social order. Marcus smiled grimly. Dr. Morrison, Judge Patterson owes me several favors, and he's known for his unconventional interpretations of the law when circumstances warrant them. I think he'll be very interested in hearing about a case where a child's welfare is being sacrificed to bureaucratic convenience. As the meeting devolved into heated arguments about federal authority, social propriety, and the limits of Christian charity, Marcus found himself thinking about the 7-year-old girl at the center of all this debate. While educated men argued, about her nature and her future. She was sitting in a jail cell. For that's what the agency holding facility really was. Probably terrified and convinced that the entire world had abandoned her. Marcus had lost his own family in a cholera epidemic 5 years earlier. His wife Anna and their infant son had died within days of each other, leaving him with a grief so profound that he had seriously considered ending his own life. Rather than continuing to exist in a world that no longer made sense, what had saved him was work, the demanding, endless work of building and maintaining a ranch that required every ounce of his energy and attention. But while work had kept him alive, it hadn't given him a reason to live. That, he was beginning to realize, might require something more than just surviving. Looking around the room at the faces of people who had already written off a child as irredeemable, Marcus made a decision that would change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. "Gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the arguing voices, "you can debate federal policy and social propriety all you want, but I'm not leaving this town without that little girl. If you want to stop me, you'll have to arrest me, and I guarantee that will create more problems for all of you than simply letting me take responsibility for one traumatized child." The threat was delivered quietly, but everyone in the room understood that Marcus Thompson was not a man to be taken lightly. His reputation for integrity was matched only by his reputation for determination, and several people in the room owed their current prosperity to his help during difficult times. Mayor Bradford looked round the room, reading the mood of his constituents and calculating the political costs of different courses of action. "Very well, Mr. Thompson," Bradford said finally, "if you're determined to take on this responsibility, the town won't stand in your way, but I want it clearly understood that any problems that arise from this arrangement will be your responsibility alone." Marcus nodded curtly. "Understood. When can I take custody of the child?" Agent Whitmore made one last attempt to maintain control of the situation. "Mr. Thompson, I must warn you that you're making a serious mistake. That child is fundamentally damaged by her savage upbringing. She will never be anything more than a burden and a constant reminder of the futility of trying to civilize the uncivilizable." Marcus looked directly into Agent Whitmore's cold eyes and saw everything that was wrong with the system that had failed Nayeli so completely. "Agent Whitmore," Marcus said quietly, "I guess we'll just have to see which one of us is right about what that little girl can become. But I'll tell you this much, she's going to get the chance to prove you wrong." As Marcus left the meeting to begin the legal proceedings that would make Nayeli his daughter, he found himself thinking about second chances, about the healing power of unconditional love, and about the possibility that saving her might just save him too. He had no idea that the child they called DeSavage to save would turn out to be exactly the salvation he had been looking for without even knowing it. What incredible courage from Marcus, standing up to an entire room of prejudice to save one little girl, shows us that sometimes one person's love can change everything. This is just the beginning of an amazing transformation. If you're moved by Marcus's determination to see potential where others see only problems, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on so you don't miss how this beautiful father-daughter story unfolds. Now, let's return to our tale and see how love and patience will prove the experts wrong. The first month of Nayeli's life at the Thompson Ranch was a testament to the patience and determination of both the traumatized child and the lonely man who had chosen to become her father. Marcus quickly discovered that Agent Whitmore had been both completely wrong and entirely accurate about the challenges he would face. Wrong about Nayeli's capacity for learning and growth, but accurate about the intensity of her resistance to anything that felt like forced civilization. Marcus's first priority was simply helping Nayeli feel safe, a goal that proved more complex than he had anticipated. The child had been so thoroughly traumatized by her experiences with white authorities that she initially viewed every act of kindness with suspicion, every gesture of care as a potential trap. She refused to sleep in the comfortable bedroom Marcus had prepared for her, instead creating a nest of blankets under the kitchen table where she could see all approaches and had multiple escape routes. She hoarded food with the desperate intensity of someone who had known real starvation. hiding pieces of bread and dried meat in secret caches throughout the house. Most challenging of all, Nayeli would not speak, not in English, not in Apache. Not at all. She communicated through gestures and expressions, watching Marcus with the wary intelligence of a wild animal trying to determine whether this new human represented safety or danger. It's going to take time. Dr. Sarah Chen told Marcus during one of her visits to check on Nayeli's physical health. Dr. Chen was one of the few medical professionals in the territory who had experience working with traumatized children, and her insights proved invaluable during those difficult early weeks. How much time? Marcus asked, watching Nayeli through the window as she sat motionless in the yard, alert to every sound and movement around her. As much as she needs. Dr. Chen replied honestly, Marcus, this child has lost everything, her family, her home, her entire world. The people who were supposed to help her heal instead tried to erase every trace of who she was. She's not just learning to trust you. She's learning to trust the possibility that anyone can be trusted. Marcus nodded, understanding more than Dr. Chen realized. His own journey back from grief had taught him that healing couldn't be rushed, that some wounds needed time and patience more than treatment. Rather than trying to force interaction, Marcus began simply including Nayeli in his daily routines, allowing her to observe ranch life without pressure to participate. He would speak to her gently as he went about his work, explaining what he was doing and why, never expecting a response, but always offering the courtesy of communication. I'm going to check on the cattle in the north pasture, Nayeli, Marcus would say each morning, using her Apache name with careful pronunciation. You're welcome to come with me if you'd like, or you can stay here with Maria Santos. Marcus's housekeeper and the wife of his foreman had proven to be an unexpected ally in helping Nayeli adjust. As a Mexican woman who had experienced her own share of prejudice and displacement, Maria seemed to understand Nayeli's situation in ways that transcended language barriers. Niga, Maria would murmur softly, using Spanish endearments as she prepared meals or went about her housework. You are safe here. No one will hurt you. The breakthrough came, surprisingly, through Marcus's horses. Nayeli had been watching him work with a young stallion that had been injured and was recovering from a leg wound. The horse was skittish and defensive, striking out at anyone who approached too quickly or made sudden movements. Marcus was in the corral, moving slowly and patiently around the injured horse, speaking in the same gentle, respectful tone he used with Nayeli. Easy. Thunder, I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt, but I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help you heal. From her perch on the fence rail, Nayeli watched with fascination as Marcus gradually gained the horse's trust. Through patience and consistency, she seemed to recognize something familiar in the interaction. The way Marcus respected the horse's fear without being deterred by it. The way he offered comfort without demanding immediate acceptance. When Thunder finally allowed Marcus to approach and examine his wound, Nayeli made a sound. The first vocalization Marcus had heard from her in for weeks. It was barely a whisper, but it was definitely approval. You understand horses, don't you? Marcus said quietly, not looking directly at Nayeli, but addressing her in the same tone he used with the injured stallion. You can see that he's not mean or bad. He's just scared and hurt. For the first time since her arrival, Nayeli looked directly at Marcus instead of watching him peripherally. In her dark eyes, he saw intelligence, understanding, and the beginning of something that might become trust. Would you like to help me with Thunder? Marcus asked gently. I think he might benefit from having someone who understands what it's like to be afraid. Nayeli climbed down from the fence and approached slowly, her movements as careful and deliberate as Marcus's had been. When she reached the horse, she did something that amazed Marcus. She began speaking softly in Apache, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to calm Thunder immediately. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the tone, gentle, respectful, full of understanding and compassion. Nayeli was sharing something with Thunder, telling him about fear and healing and the possibility of trusting again. What is she saying? Marcus asked Dr. Chen later. After describing the remarkable scene, I speak some Apache, Dr. Chen replied. Thoughtfully, from what you've described, It sounds like she was telling Thunder about her own journey, about losing her family, about being afraid, about finding someone who offered safety without demanding immediate surrender. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. She was telling my horse her story, and probably his story too. Apache culture has a deep understanding of the connection between humans and animals. She was helping Thunder understand that being healed doesn't mean forgetting who you are. From that day forward, Nayeli became Marcus's constant companion in caring for the horses. She had an intuitive understanding of their needs and moods that impressed even Carlos Santos, the ranch foreman, who had been working with horses for 30 years. Sigor Marcus, Carlos said one afternoon as they watched Nayeli successfully calm a mare that had been agitated. All day, this Niga, she has a gift, the horses. They trust her like they trust no one else. As autumn turned to winter, Nayeli's world gradually expanded beyond the horses to include other aspects of ranch life. She learned to help with feeding the cattle, to gather eggs from the chickens, to assist Maria with household tasks. Most importantly, she began to speak, first in Apache to the animals, then in a mixture of Apache and Spanish with Maria, and finally in halting English with Marcus. "Thunder is better," she said one evening as they finished caring for the horses. It was one of her first complete sentences in English, and Marcus felt tears prick his eyes at the milestone. "Yes, he is better," Marcus agreed. "You helped heal him, Nayeli. You have a gift for healing." Nayeli considered this carefully before responding. "You help heal me too. You not try to make me different. You let me be Nayeli and learn new things." Marcus knelt down to her level, wanting her to see the sincerity in his eyes. "Nayeli, you being exactly who you are is what makes you special. I don't want you to become someone different. I want you to become the best version of yourself." "Even if other people say I am savage?" Nayeli asked, using a word she had obviously heard applied to herself. Marcus felt anger surge through him at the thought of anyone calling this remarkable child savage. "Nayeli, the people who say that don't understand the difference between being wild and being strong, between being uncivilized and being free. You're not savage, you're brave and smart and kind. You're exactly the daughter I would have chosen if I could have chosen." Nayeli studied his face with the serious intensity that characterized all her interactions. "You choose me even when other people say I am too broken to fix. I chose you because you're not broken." Marcus said firmly, "You're wounded, but wounds heal. You're strong enough to survive terrible things and still be kind to injured horses. That's not broken. That's extraordinary." For the first time since he had known her, Nayeli smiled, a real, genuine expression of happiness that transformed her entire face. "I choose you too, Papa Marcus. You are a good father." As Marcus tucked Nayeli into the bed she had finally agreed to sleep in, a bed in the room he had prepared for her, decorated with both Apache crafts that Dr. Chen had helped him acquire and comfortable furnishings that reflected his care for her comfort. He marveled at the journey they had both taken. The experts had been wrong about everything. Nayeli wasn't too savage to save. She was too intelligent to accept salvation. That required her to abandon everything that made her who she was. She hadn't needed civilization. She had needed love, patience, and the freedom to heal at her own pace while maintaining her dignity and identity. More importantly, Marcus realized that in choosing to save Nayeli, he had somehow saved himself. The empty house had become a home again. The purposeless days had become filled with meaning, and the grief that had defined his existence for 5 years had been replaced by hope for the future. As he watched his daughter sleep peacefully for the first time since she had come to live with him, Marcus understood that some of the most important rescues are mutual. He had given Nayeli a family and a safe place to heal, but she had given him something equally precious, a reason to believe in tomorrow and a reminder that love really could overcome any obstacle. 2 years after Marcus Thompson had walked out of that contentious town meeting with a 7-year-old Apache girl, the transformation in both their lives had become the subject of considerable discussion. Throughout the territory, Nayeli, now 9 years old, had blossomed into a confident, articulate child who moved seamlessly between her Apache heritage and her new life on the ranch. The girl who had once been dismissed As to Savage, to Save now spoke 3 languages fluently, could read and write in English with remarkable skill, and had developed a reputation as one of the most gifted horse trainers in the territory. More importantly, she had become the center of Marcus's world, transforming his isolated ranch into a place of laughter, learning, and unexpected joy. But their peaceful existence was about to face its greatest test. The trouble began with the arrival of a new Indian agent, Harrison Pierce, whose rigid interpretation of federal policy and personal prejudices made his predecessor look compassionate by comparison. Pierce had heard about the irregular arrangement at the Thompson Ranch and had come to Copper Creek with orders to regularize the situation. According to proper federal guidelines, gentlemen, Pierce announced during an emergency town meeting, I've been sent here to address a serious violation of federal Indian policy. It has come to the attention of the Bureau of Indian Affairs that a white man in this community has been allowed to adopt an Apache child without proper oversight or adherence to established protocols. Mayor Bradford, who had been re-elected, partly on his platform of maintaining community stability, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Agent Pierce, the Thompson arrangement was approved by local authorities and has proven highly successful. The child is thriving, and there have been no problems whatsoever. Pierce consulted his official documents with the authority of a man who had never met a regulation he didn't love. Mayor Bradford, success is measured by adherence to policy, not by sentimental notions of individual happiness. This Apache child should have been placed in an appropriate educational facility where she could receive proper instruction in Christian values and civilized behavior. Dr. Morrison, who had never quite forgiven Marcus for making him look foolish 2 years earlier, seized the opportunity to reassert his expertise. Agent Pierce, those of us who understand the savage nature of these people tried to warn Mr. Thompson that his experiment was doomed to failure. I'm sure that closer examination will reveal serious deficiencies in the child's development. Pierce nodded approvingly. Precisely my concern, Doctor. I propose to conduct a thorough evaluation of this child to determine whether she has been properly civilized or whether immediate intervention is required to correct the damage done by this irregular upbringing. Word of Pierce's intentions reached Marcus through Carlos Santos, whose wife Maria had heard the gossip at the general store. Marcus felt a familiar anger building in his chest, not the hot rage of impulse, but the cold fury of a man whose family was being threatened by ignorance and bureaucracy. Papa, Nayeli said when Marcus told her about Pierce's planned evaluation. What does this man want with me? Marcus knelt down to face his daughter, seeing her intelligence and maturity in eyes that should have belonged to a much older child. He wants to test you, sweetheart. He wants to see if you've learned to be civilized according to his definition. Nayeli considered this seriously. What if I fail his test? What if he says I am still too savage? Marcus felt his heart clench at the worry in her voice. Nayeli, listen to me very carefully. You are not savage, you are not broken, and you are not going anywhere. You're my daughter, and no government official is going to change that. But what if? No what ifs, Marcus interrupted gently. We're going to show Agent Pierce exactly who you are and what you've become. And if he can't see your intelligence, your kindness, and your strength, then that's his failure, not yours. The evaluation took place on a Tuesday morning in the schoolhouse, with Agent Pierce presiding over what resembled a formal court proceeding more than an educational assessment. He had recruited Dr. Morrison to assist with the scientific aspects of the evaluation, along with Reverend Williams to assess Nayeli's moral and spiritual development. Marcus sat in the back of the room, his presence officially tolerated but clearly unwelcome. He watched as Pierce subjected Nayeli to a series of tests designed to measure her assimilation into white society, tests that seemed more interested in what she had forgotten than what she had learned. Child, Pierce began, in the condescending tone he probably thought appropriate for addressing primitives. Can you recite the Lord's Prayer? Nayeli looked at the man with the same careful assessment she had once reserved for potentially dangerous strangers. Yes, sir. In English, Spanish, or Apache? Pierce's eyebrows rose at this unexpected response. The Lord's Prayer exists in Apache. My Father taught me that God speaks all languages, Nayeli replied simply. Would you like to hear it in Apache? It's very beautiful. Before Pierce could object, Nayeli began reciting the prayer in her native language, her voice carrying the musical quality that always emerged when she spoke Apache. The beauty and dignity of her recitation seemed to catch even Pierce off guard. Interesting, Pierce said curtly, clearly uncomfortable with the unexpected eloquence. Now, can you demonstrate proper feminine deportment by setting a table for a formal dinner? What followed was a masterclass in cultural adaptation. Nayeli not only set the table with perfect precision according to white social conventions, but she also explained each step and its purpose, demonstrating an understanding of social customs that went far beyond mere mimicry. My father taught me that showing respect for guests is important. In all cultures, Nayeli explained as she arranged the silverware. Apache people have different ways of showing respect, but the feeling is the same. Dr. Morrison leaned forward, clearly searching for evidence of the deficiencies he was certain must exist. Child, can you read and write in English? Nayeli nodded and moved to the blackboard, where she wrote her name in elegant script, followed by a complete sentence. My name is Nayeli Thompson, and I am proud to be both Apache and the daughter of Marcus Thompson. Read this passage aloud, Pierce commanded, handing her a book of moral instruction designed for much older children. Nayeli read the passage flawlessly, her pronunciation clear and her comprehension evident in the way she naturally emphasized important concepts. When she finished, Pierce grudgingly moved on to mathematics, where Nayeli demonstrated skills that exceeded those of most children her age. But it was Pierce's final test that revealed both his true intentions and Nayeli's remarkable character. Child, Pierce said with obvious satisfaction, I want you to tell me about your life before Mr. Thompson took you in. I want you to describe the savage customs and practices of your people, so that we can understand how far you've progressed towards civilization. The room fell silent as everyone realized what Pierce was really asking. He wanted Nayeli to denounce her heritage, to describe her Apache culture in terms that would justify its destruction. Nayeli looked at Pierce for a long moment, and Marcus could see her making a decision that would define not just this evaluation, but her understanding of who she was and what she valued. Mr. Pierce, Nayeli said with quiet dignity, my Apache family taught me to honor the earth, to respect all living things, to care for those who cannot care for themselves, and to speak truth even when it is difficult. They taught me that courage means protecting those you love, and that wisdom comes from listening to the stories of elders. She paused, looking directly into Pierce's eyes. My father Marcus has taught me these same values, but in different ways. He has shown me that good people exist in all cultures, and that being civilized means treating others with kindness and respect, not making them ashamed of who they are. Pierce's face reddened at what he clearly perceived as defiance. Child, you seem to have a romanticized view of savage customs. Surely you must recognize that Apache ways are primitive and unsuited to modern civilized society. Nayeli's response was delivered with the calm authority of someone far beyond her years. Mr. Pierce, I have lived in both worlds now. I have seen kindness and cruelty in both cultures. The difference is not between Apache ways and white ways. The difference is between people who choose love and people who choose fear. The simple truth of her statement seemed to stun the room into silence. Here was a 9-year-old child demonstrating more wisdom and maturity than the adults, who were supposedly evaluating her fitness for civilization. Pierce made one final attempt to assert his authority. Mr. Thompson, while this child shows some evidence of learning, she clearly retains inappropriate attachment to primitive beliefs and practices. I recommend that she be transferred to a proper educational facility, where these deficiencies can be corrected. Marcus stood up slowly, his decision made. Agent Pierce, I've listened to your evaluation, and I have to say I'm disappointed. You've spent the morning with the most remarkable child I've ever known, and all you can see are problems to be fixed. Marcus walked to stand beside Nayeli, placing his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of protection and pride. This child speaks 3 languages, reads at a high school level, understands mathematics that would challenge most adults, and demonstrates wisdom and compassion that put most grown men to shame. If you think those are deficiencies, then your definition of civilization needs serious examination. Mr. Thompson, I'm not finished. Marcus interrupted firmly. Nayeli is my daughter in every way that matters. She's been legally adopted, she's thriving in every measurable way, and she's loved unconditionally. If the federal government wants to change that arrangement, they'll have to provide compelling evidence that their alternative would serve her better interests. Pierce opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by an unexpected voice from the back of the room. Agent Pierce, I believe I can provide some perspective on this matter. Everyone turned to see Judge Patterson entering the schoolhouse, accompanied by a woman in travel clothes who carried herself with obvious authority. Judge Patterson, Mayor Bradford said with surprise, we weren't expecting you. I asked Judge Patterson to attend this evaluation, the woman said, stepping forward. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Hartford, and I'm a specialist in child psychology from the University of Denver. I've been observing this proceeding on behalf of the Territorial Education Commission. Dr. Hartford approached Nayeli with a gentle smile. Young lady, would you mind if I asked you a few questions? For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Hartford conducted her own evaluation of Nayeli, but instead of looking for deficiencies, she seemed genuinely interested in understanding the child's experiences, insights, and development. Nayeli, Dr. Hartford said finally, what do you want to be when you grow up? Nayeli thought carefully before answering. I want to help people and animals who are hurt. I want to be a bridge between different people so they can understand each other better. And I want to make my father proud. Dr. Hartford smiled and turned to address the room. Gentlemen, I've conducted educational evaluations throughout the Western Territories for the past 10 years, and I can state categorically that this child represents one of the most successful examples of cultural integration I have ever encountered. Pierce's face turned purple with indignation. Dr. Hartford, you can't possibly be suggesting, I'm stating, Agent Pierce, that Nayeli Thompson is a remarkable young woman who has been raised with exceptional skill and love. She demonstrates advanced intellectual development, strong moral character, and the kind of cultural confidence that produces effective leaders.